All right, in this video we're going to look at variables and Introduction 2. So let's get a better understanding what the purpose of the variables are. So first off, a variable is going to be a named storage location holding data. So what do I mean by named storage location? So when we create basically information, or when information's in the system, it's going to be stored in memory. Now, in order for us to keep track of the information in memory, it's easy for us to create a variable for that. So it's basically used to, again, store and manipulate the particular data values. So the Python variables are what we call dynamically typed or dynamically created. And this will come into greater perspective when we start utilizing certain commands and understanding how things work. So hold tight for a moment here. So again, you don't need to basically explicitly declare the variable type on this part. Now what do I mean by the variable type? So if you recall from the earlier class, or actually last week, Python has, and as well as other programming languages, different data types. So the ones that we're going to be focusing on more in our initial introduction to Python is going to be a numeric type of type int, float. We've been working with strings, and we're also going to get introduced to the Boolean type. As we progress through the course, we're going to be looking at this different sequence types of lists, tuples, ranges, and sets, and the mapping type of dictionary. So these are the different data types. So keep that in mind, because when it's being identified that we do not need to explicitly declare the variable type, I'll show you in a moment here. Now, before we get any further, there are going to be some naming restrictions you need to be aware of when you are creating variables. So you can use uppercase and lowercase letters. You can utilize digits from 0 through 9. And you can also utilize the underscore character. Easy. But the first character of the variable name cannot be a digit. You can start out with the underscore or some kind of alphabetic character. Cannot contain spaces. Absolutely no way. Error codes will get generated there. And also you cannot utilize Python keywords. So you could not create a variable type as print or any other Python keywords that you'll be learning as we continue on. Another important element here, uppercase and lowercase characters are distinct, meaning that they are going to be considered something different. So a variable of cat in uppercase versus a variable of cat in lowercase, these are all going to be different variable types, so keep that in mind as well. All right, now let's take a look at some of the naming method styles or techniques for variable names, and this also goes with other concepts as we go through naming files, etc. But let's take a look at the different methods here. So one, we have a snake case, and that basically is all lowercase letters utilizing a underscore. So you could see here in my underscore variable and then total underscore amount. Another method is what they call a camel case. So you could see kind of like a rides or what I can kind of consider a bump case. So each word, except for the first one, begins with a capital letter. So these would be kind of examples there. So we start out with the lowercase letter, and then the next word is going to be in uppercase, and then so on and so forth. Another one is Pascal case, which is going to be similar to the camel case, but the initial letter is also going to be a capital letter, so something along this line. Another one is utilizing all uppercase. Uppercase letters are typically utilized for constants. Now, what I mean by constants is variables that will not change value. So good idea to keep those separately, and it's a good visualizer to identify that that is a variable type of constant. So for example, like max value or even the value for pi. All right, continuing on here, we have a title case. First letter of each word is going to be capitalized, often utilized with the title headings or titles there, something along like this. And then we got the kebab case where we have all lowercase letters separated, now this time by hyphens. All right, so something along those lines like that. Now, you want to kind of stay fairly consistent. If you get a job working somewhere for a development team, they may have things outlined in terms of how variables are done and the naming conventions. So let's take a look now at printing variables. So we're going to utilize the print statement to print the variable. So a single print variable or multiple variables, we're going to be utilizing them and separating by commas. Now that may not mean anything right now until we start looking at the code and getting a better idea of how that looks. All right, so what we have here is we have two variables identified here. So we had type name and type age. So name is Alice, so you notice that Alice here is in quotes, so that means it is a string, and age is 25, so this is going to be basically an integer value. So when we write our inputs or our print statement, so we're given this a header, here's our comma, name, comma, age, comma, and then the value for age right there. So let's take a look at what the output will be then. So the output would look something along those lines. So let's take a look at our coding and take a look at what happens when we make certain changes. So here we have our information. Again, same thing. These are our defined variables here. So you notice I'm utilizing comments. And again, they're simple things to identify what the tasks are doing. So let's go ahead and run this code and take a look to see what the output's going to be. So we run it, and then we got our output. So we have the name, and then we have the actual value that's being displayed, age, and then basically the age value of 25. So that's basically how we end up displaying different values of the variables. All right, now let's take a look at something a little bit different, still the same kind of concept, but this time we have some additional values, and if you notice the print statement, that is configured slightly differently. And let's go ahead and explain what goes on in this component. So let's take a look at this code. So once again, I have a section here where I'm defining my variables. And now this time, if we take a look at the code, my print statement is written slightly differently. So you notice I start out with my open paren double quote, hello, my name is, and now I'm doing something very different here. Instead of now putting a comma or utilizing comma, I'm utilizing a plus sign here. Now, let's go ahead and run this, and what I want to do real quick is to comment this one out. So now when I run this particular code, you say, hello, my name is Grace. So again, we take a look at the code. To better understand this particular method is this part right here, that is referred to as concatenation. So with the plus symbols here, I'm adding the particular components. So here is my string value, this is my variable, and then I'm adding that individual period at the end. So when it all gets executed, everything merges together, concatenates to something like this. Now the thing I wanted to show you here is we go back and uncomment this code, and we're gonna run this particular code, and as you could see, wow, well, I got an error. So I got an error on line 10. As you can see here, I'm getting an error that says only concatenate str. Now str is going to be short for strings. So, and it says here not int to str. So there is a slight problem with the code. So let's take a look to see why and how we're able to fix it. So once again, I'm utilizing the pluses to concatenate. Now if I change this around, right, and I put commas instead of the pluses, and then I run the code, that worked. You see that end up working here. Little issue here in terms of the spacing, because you notice that there's too much of a space in between here, and you could slightly tell on that. So again, this is part of the formatting element here. So that worked, but when we're doing concatenation here, replace this with the pluses again. Yep. Alrighty, and again we're going to run that. We're going to get that error. Is because the word age, or the value or the variable age, you notice that up here, this is not basically the same red color. This is basically identifying that age is a integer value. And in our next video, we're going to basically identify and display what the value or what type of variable it is. So here we're going to have to basically change it to str, and then we'll put open and close brackets around there for age. So we just, as the program is executed, now we're taking this and we're making age, which is basically an integer by default, to now a string. So now when we run it, you notice that our output completely works here. Okay. So that is just another thing to keep in mind when you're writing code and printing out variables.